The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand estate as Camilla Windsor stood at her bedroom window, watching the royal guards march up the cobblestone driveway. Their polished boots clicked in perfect rhythm, and their red uniforms gleamed in the early light. She had been expecting this day, but her heart still raced as she saw the official documents in the lead guard's gloved hand. Camilla was not just any ordinary woman. She was the distant cousin of the late Queen Elizabeth, a connection that had brought both privilege and burden throughout her life. The sprawling mansion she called home had been in her family for over 2 centuries, passed down through generations of noble blood. Its walls held secrets, its rooms whispered stories, and its hidden chambers contained treasures that even she was only beginning to discover. The estate, known as Thornfield Manor, sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured gardens and ancient oak trees. The main house boasted 37 rooms, each filled with priceless antiques, oil paintings by master artists, and furniture that had once graced royal palaces. But it was what lay hidden beneath the floorboards and behind false walls that made this property truly extraordinary. As the guards approached the front door, Camilla smoothed her silk dress and took a deep breath. She had lived here alone since her husband's death 3 years ago, finding comfort in the familiar creaking of old wood and the gentle ticking of grandfather clocks that lined the hallways. The servants had been dismissed months ago when the legal troubles began, leaving her with only Mrs. Henderson, the loyal housekeeper who had worked for the family for 40 years. The heavy brass knocker echoed through the marble foyer as the guards announced their arrival. Camilla descended the grand staircase slowly, her hand gliding along the ornate banister that her great-grandmother had once touched. Each step felt like a farewell to the life she had known, to the sanctuary that had sheltered her family's most precious secrets. Captain Morrison, the lead guard, was a tall man with kind eyes but a stern demeanor. He had served the crown for 25 years and took no pleasure in what he was about to do. As Camilla opened the massive wooden door, he removed his hat respectfully and cleared his throat. "Lady Camilla," he began, his voice formal but not unkind, "I regret to inform you that by order of His Majesty's court, we are here to take possession of Thornfield Manor and all its contents. You have been granted 24 hours to collect your personal belongings before the property is sealed." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow, even though she had known they were coming. Her late husband's gambling debts and poor investments had finally caught up with the family fortune. The courts had ruled that the estate must be sold to satisfy the creditors, but what they didn't know was that the true value of Thornfield Manor lay not in its obvious wealth, but in the hidden treasures that had been accumulating in secret for generations. As the guards began their systematic documentation of the property, Camilla excused herself and walked slowly through the rooms that had shaped her entire life. In the library, she ran her fingers along the leather-bound books that her ancestors had collected from around the world. Many contained handwritten notes from famous authors, and some held maps leading to other hidden treasures scattered across England. The dining room's crystal chandelier caught the afternoon light, casting rainbow patterns across the mahogany table where kings and queens had once dined. The china cabinet held plates that had been gifted by foreign dignitaries, and the silver service had been blessed by 3 different popes throughout history. But it was in her private study that Camilla's heart ached the most. Here, behind a portrait of her great-great-grandmother, lay a secret panel that led to a narrow staircase. This hidden passage connected to a network of rooms that the guards would never find. Rooms that contained the Queen's lost treasures that had been secretly moved here during World War II for safekeeping. As evening approached, Camilla sat in the conservatory among her beloved orchids, watching the guards methodically catalog every visible item in her home. They worked with efficient precision, but she noticed they paid special attention to the more obvious valuables: the paintings, the sculptures, the jewelry in her bedroom safe. Mrs. Henderson appeared with a cup of tea, her eyes red from crying. The elderly woman had been like a mother to Camilla, and the thought of losing both her home and her dearest friend was almost unbearable. "My lady," Mrs. Henderson whispered, "what will become of the hidden rooms? What about the Queen's collection?" Camilla took the teacup with trembling hands and looked out at the gardens where she had played as a child. Tomorrow, all of this would belong to strangers who had no idea of the history contained within these walls. The irony was not lost on her. The very treasures that could save the estate must remain hidden, for revealing them would raise questions about how they came to be here, questions that could disgrace the royal family and rewrite history books. As darkness fell over Thornfield Manor, Camilla began to formulate a plan. The guards would complete their inventory and seal the house, but they didn't know about the hidden passages that connected to the old monastery ruins on the far edge of the property. If she was clever and careful, she might be able to preserve her family's greatest secrets while the world believed they had taken everything. The night would be long, and tomorrow would bring the end of an era. But perhaps, just perhaps, it would also mark the beginning of the greatest treasure hunt in royal history. The grandfather clock in the main hallway chimed midnight as Camilla crept through the darkened corridors of Thornfield Manor. The guards had retired to their temporary quarters in the servants' wing, confident that the grieving widow posed no threat to their mission. They had no idea that beneath their feet lay a maze of tunnels and hidden chambers that had been carved out over centuries. Camilla carried only a small flashlight and wore dark clothing to avoid detection. Her destination was the secret room behind her study, where her family had kept detailed records of every treasure hidden throughout the estate. The leather-bound journal that contained these secrets had been passed down from mother to daughter for 5 generations, each adding their own discoveries and safeguarding methods. As she pressed the hidden mechanism behind her great-great-grandmother's portrait, the wall panel slid silently open. The narrow staircase beyond was carved from the original stone foundation of the manor, dating back to when monks had first built on this land in the 1400s. The air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of aged wood and old secrets. The hidden chamber at the bottom of the stairs was larger than most bedrooms, with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with wooden shelves. But these shelves didn't hold books. They contained artifacts that would make museum curators weep with joy. Golden chalices embedded with precious gems sat next to ancient manuscripts written by long-dead saints. Paintings that the art world believed had been destroyed in various wars hung carefully preserved on the walls. But the most incredible sight was the collection that occupied the center of the room. Here, displayed on specially built stands, were items that had once belonged to Queen Victoria herself. A diamond tiara that she had worn to her coronation sat next to personal letters written in her own handwriting. There were also items from Queen Elizabeth I, including a jeweled dagger and a small prayer book with her personal seal. Camilla opened the family journal and began reading by flashlight. The entries told an incredible story that spanned centuries. Her ancestor, Lady Margaret Windsor, had been a close confidant of Queen Victoria and had been entrusted with safeguarding certain royal treasures during times of political uncertainty. When World War I began, more items were secretly moved to Thornfield Manor. During World War II, when London was being bombed nightly, Queen Elizabeth's mother had personally overseen the transfer of additional priceless artifacts to the hidden chambers. What made this collection so sensitive was not just its monetary value, but the historical secrets it contained. Among the documents were letters that revealed hidden love affairs, political conspiracies, and family scandals that could embarrass the current royal family if they ever became public. There were also items that had been officially reported as lost or destroyed, including several pieces from the Crown Jewels collection that had been secretly replaced with replicas. As Camilla read deeper into the journal, she discovered that her family had not been mere caretakers of these treasures. They had been part of an elaborate network of noble families who had worked together to preserve royal history during turbulent times. Each family had hidden different collections, and together they formed a secret archive of British royal heritage that was more complete than anything held in official collections. The sound of footsteps above made Camilla freeze. She quickly extinguished her flashlight and listened carefully. One of the guards was walking through the house, probably making a routine security check. She waited in the darkness, surrounded by centuries of royal secrets, until the footsteps faded away. When she was certain it was safe, Camilla turned her attention to the most crucial part of her mission. According to the journal, there were several items in this collection that could potentially save Thornfield Manor, if they were sold legally. A set of emerald earrings that had belonged to Catherine the Great and had somehow made their way into Queen Victoria's private collection could fetch millions at auction. A series of rare stamps that had been printed exclusively for royal use were worth a fortune to collectors. But selling these items would require proving their authenticity, which would lead to questions about how they had come to be in private hands. It would expose the secret agreement between the royal family and the Windsor family that had protected these treasures for over a century. Camilla carefully photographed several of the most valuable pieces with her phone, making sure to capture any identifying marks or signatures. She also took detailed notes about their history according to the family journal. If she was going to save her family's legacy, she would need to find a way to navigate the complex legal and ethical challenges ahead. As dawn approached, Camilla made her way back through the hidden passage to her study. She had one more crucial task to complete before the guards resumed their work. In her bedroom safe, which the guards had already catalogued, she kept a small collection of jewelry that appeared to be her most valuable possessions. But hidden among these pieces was a key that opened a safety deposit box in a London bank, a box that contained copies of all the documents proving the royal family's secret arrangement with her ancestors. The morning sun was beginning to filter through the tall windows as Camilla returned to her bedroom. She could hear the guards stirring in the servants' quarters, preparing for another day of cataloging her family's possessions. In just a few hours, they would escort her from the premises and seal Thornfield Manor forever. But now Camilla had something she hadn't possessed the day before: hope. The hidden treasures were safe for now, and she had the documentation needed to potentially reclaim her family's rightful place in history. The challenge would be finding a way to use this knowledge without destroying the very treasures she was trying to protect. As she sat at her dressing table, putting on the jewelry she would be allowed to take with her, Camilla made a silent promise to her ancestors. She would find a way to honor their legacy and preserve the incredible collection they had risked everything to protect. The guards might be taking her house, but they would never claim the true treasures of Thornfield Manor. The black sedan pulled away from Thornfield Manor as the morning mist clung to the ancient oak trees. Camilla sat in the passenger seat, clutching a small leather suitcase that contained the few personal items she had been allowed to take. Behind her, the guards were already placing official seals on the doors and windows of her family home. In just 24 hours, her entire world had been transformed from one of privilege and history to uncertainty and exile. Mrs. Henderson sat beside her in the back seat, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. The loyal housekeeper had nowhere else to go, and Camilla couldn't bear the thought of abandoning the woman who had devoted her life to the Windsor family. Together, they were heading to a small flat in London that Camilla had secretly rented months ago when the legal troubles first began. The flat was a stark contrast to the grandeur of Thornfield Manor. Located on the third floor of a Victorian building in Bloomsbury, it consisted of just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a sitting room barely large enough for a sofa and chair. But it was private, anonymous, and most importantly, it was a place where Camilla could plan her next moves without the watchful eyes of creditors or government officials. As they settled into their humble new accommodations, Camilla's mind was racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. The key to the safety deposit box felt heavy in her pocket, and she knew that within hours she would be holding documents that could change everything. But first she needed to reach out to someone who could help her navigate the treacherous waters of royal protocol and legal complexities. Professor James Hartwell had been her late husband's closest friend at Oxford University, and he now served as one of Britain's leading experts on royal history and authentication. More importantly, he had connections within the palace and the art world that could prove invaluable. Camilla had not spoken to him since her husband's funeral, but she hoped their old friendship would motivate him to help. The phone call was brief but promising. Professor Hartwell agreed to meet her at his office the following morning, and something in Camilla's voice convinced him that this was a matter of utmost importance. She didn't reveal the true nature of her discovery over the phone, but she hinted that it concerned historical artifacts that could rewrite certain chapters of royal history. That evening, as Mrs. Henderson prepared a simple dinner in the tiny kitchen, Camilla sat by the window looking out at the busy London street below. People hurried past with their daily concerns, completely unaware that just miles away lay hidden treasures that represented centuries of British heritage. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, but it also filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her husband's death. The next morning, Camilla took the underground to the bank where her safety deposit box was housed. The building was old and imposing, with marble columns and brass fittings that spoke of discretion and security. The manager, Mr. Pemberton, had known her family for decades and expressed his condolences about the loss of the estate. Inside the safety deposit box were documents that even Camilla had never seen before. Her husband had placed them there shortly before his death, along with a letter explaining their significance. The papers included original agreements signed by Queen Victoria herself, authorizing the Windsor family to serve as secret guardians of certain royal artifacts during times of national crisis. There were also photographs of items in the hidden chambers, taken over the decades to document their condition and provenance. Most shocking of all was a letter dated just 5 years earlier, signed by Queen Elizabeth II's private secretary, acknowledging the continued existence of the secret arrangement and expressing the royal family's gratitude for the Windsor family's discretion and care. This document proved that the current royal family knew about the hidden collection and had approved of its safekeeping. Armed with this explosive evidence, Camilla made her way to Professor Hartwell's office at the British Museum. The professor was a distinguished man in his 70s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of scholarly authority. His office was lined with books on royal history, and his desk was covered with photographs of artifacts he was currently researching. When Camilla spread the documents across his desk, Professor Hartwell's face went pale. He examined each paper carefully, checking watermarks, signatures, and official seals with the practiced eye of an expert. After nearly an hour of silent study, he looked up at Camilla with a mixture of amazement and concern. "My dear woman," he said quietly, "do you realize what you possess here? These documents prove the existence of a secret royal archive that historians have theorized about for decades, but never been able to confirm. If these artifacts are authentic and properly documented, they represent one of the most significant historical discoveries of our time." But Professor Hartwell also understood the delicate political implications. The royal family had spent considerable effort in recent decades to modernize their image and distance themselves from the more controversial aspects of their history. The existence of a secret treasure trove, especially one that included items that were officially listed as lost or destroyed, could create a scandal that would rock the monarchy. "The question," Professor Hartwell continued, "is what you intend to do with this knowledge. You could potentially save your family estate by revealing the existence of these treasures, but doing so might destroy relationships that have been carefully maintained for over a century." Camilla had been wrestling with this exact dilemma since discovering the hidden chambers. She could see 3 possible paths forward, each with its own risks and rewards. She could quietly sell a few pieces through private collectors, keeping the secret intact but limiting her financial recovery. She could approach the royal family directly and attempt to negotiate a solution that satisfied both parties, or she could go public with the discovery, claiming her family's rightful recognition as guardians of British heritage, while potentially embarrassing the crown. As she sat in Professor Hartwell's office, surrounded by centuries of royal history, Camilla realized that her decision would not only determine her own fate, but could also influence how future generations understood the hidden complexities of the British monarchy. The treasures hidden beneath Thornfield Manor were more than just valuable artifacts. They were the key to unlocking secrets that had been carefully guarded for generations. The weight of this responsibility was enormous, but Camilla felt a growing determination to find a solution that honored both her family's legacy and the trust that had been placed in them by generations of royals. The game had changed, and now she held the most powerful cards. Professor Hartwell leaned back in his leather chair and studied Camilla's face carefully. After decades of working with priceless artifacts and navigating the complex relationships between private collectors and public institutions, he had developed an instinct for reading people's true motivations. What he saw in Camilla's eyes was not greed or desperation, but a genuine desire to do the right thing while preserving her family's honor. "There is a fourth option," he said slowly, his fingers drumming against the mahogany desk, "one that might satisfy all parties involved, but it would require extraordinary trust and discretion from everyone concerned." Camilla leaned forward, her heart racing with anticipation. She had been hoping that Professor Hartwell's expertise would reveal possibilities she hadn't considered. "What if," he continued, "we could arrange for the collection to be officially recognized as a national treasure, while allowing your family to retain guardianship? There are precedents for this arrangement, particularly with historic houses that contain significant collections but lack the funds for proper maintenance and security. The professor explained that the British government had established programs designed to preserve important cultural heritage while keeping it in private hands. Under such an arrangement, the Windsor family could potentially reclaim Thornfield Manor as the official custodians of a nationally recognized collection, with the government providing funding for security, maintenance, and public access. But first, they would need to approach the royal family directly to gauge their reaction to having the secret collection revealed. Even in this controlled manner, Professor Hartwell had connections within the palace hierarchy, and he believed he could arrange a private meeting with the Queen's private secretary to discuss the situation confidentially. Over the next 3 days, a series of carefully orchestrated phone calls took place. Professor Hartwell contacted Lord Pemberton, the Queen's deputy private secretary, explaining that a matter of historical significance had come to light that required immediate and discreet attention. He was careful not to reveal specific details over the phone, but his reputation and connections were sufficient to secure a private meeting at Buckingham Palace. Camilla spent those 3 days in a state of nervous anticipation. She walked the streets of London, visiting museums and galleries, studying how priceless collections were displayed and protected. At the British Museum, she stood before cases containing artifacts that had been donated by noble families over the centuries, imagining her own family's treasures receiving similar recognition and care. Mrs. Henderson proved to be an unexpected source of strength during this anxious period. The elderly housekeeper had worked at Thornfield Manor long enough to remember when Camilla's mother-in-law had first shown her some of the hidden rooms. She shared stories that weren't recorded in the family journal, including details about how certain pieces had been moved during particularly dangerous periods, and which items held the most sentimental value for the royal family. Your late husband's grandmother used to tell me that Queen Elizabeth's mother personally selected which pieces to move during the war, Mrs. Henderson revealed as they sat in the small London flat. She said the Queen Mother was particularly concerned about preserving items that told the story of strong royal women throughout history. This information gave Camilla additional insight into the emotional significance of the collection beyond its monetary value. These weren't just artifacts, they were carefully chosen representations of royal heritage that had been entrusted to her family during times of national crisis. The meeting at Buckingham Palace was arranged for a Thursday morning, and Camilla found herself more nervous than she had ever been in her life. She chose her clothing carefully, selecting a conservative navy dress and her grandmother's pearl necklace, items that conveyed respect for tradition while asserting her own dignity and status. Professor Hartwell met her at the palace gates, and together they were escorted through corridors lined with paintings and tapestries that represented centuries of royal collecting. Camilla couldn't help but wonder how many other lost treasures might be hidden in private collections around the country, secretly preserved by families who had been entrusted with their care. Lord Pemberton received them in a modest office that belied his significant influence within the royal household. He was a man of medium height with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority that came from years of handling sensitive matters with absolute discretion. After offering tea and expressing appropriate condolences about the loss of Thornfield Manor, he invited them to explain the purpose of their visit. Professor Hartwell began by outlining the historical significance of the documents Camilla possessed, carefully emphasizing the legitimate nature of her family's guardianship and the care with which the collection had been preserved. When he mentioned the recent letter from Queen Elizabeth's private secretary, acknowledging the arrangement, Lord Pemberton's eyebrows rose slightly, the first sign of emotion he had shown. Camilla then presented her proposal, speaking with a confidence that surprised even her. She explained that her family had never sought personal gain from their guardianship, but that the current financial crisis threatened not only their ability to continue protecting the collection but also the very existence of the secure location where it was housed. Their family has honored this trust for over a century, she said, looking directly at Lord Pemberton. We have never sought recognition or compensation, and we have never betrayed the confidence placed in us. But now we find ourselves in a position where we must either find a way to preserve this arrangement or risk losing everything that previous generations worked so hard to protect. Lord Pemberton listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a leather-bound pad. When Camilla finished speaking, he was quiet for several long moments, clearly weighing the implications of what he had heard. "Lady Camilla," he said finally, "what you describe is indeed a matter of considerable delicacy. The arrangement you reference was established during times when the monarchy faced existential threats that are difficult for modern people to understand. The royal family has always been grateful for the discretion and care shown by families like yours." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "However, any change to long-standing arrangements of this nature would require consultation at the highest levels. I would need to present this matter to Her Majesty's private secretary, who would then need to discuss it with the Queen herself." The meeting concluded with Lord Pemberton promising to investigate the matter thoroughly and provide a response within 1 week. As Camilla and Professor Hartwell left the palace, both felt cautiously optimistic. The reaction had been serious and respectful rather than dismissive or hostile, but they also understood that they had set in motion a process that could have far-reaching consequences. The royal family would now need to decide whether to acknowledge publicly what had been secret for generations, and whether they were willing to take unprecedented steps to preserve an arrangement that had served them well for over a century. The next week would determine whether Camilla's bold gamble would save her family's legacy or destroy it forever. The days following the palace meeting crawled by with agonizing slowness. Camilla found herself jumping every time the phone rang, hoping for news from Lord Pemberton while simultaneously dreading what that news might contain. She had gambled everything on the royal family's willingness to acknowledge their secret arrangement, but she was beginning to realize that even a positive response might come with conditions she hadn't anticipated. Professor Hartwell called on the third day with disturbing news. Through his network of contacts in the art and museum world, he had learned that someone was asking questions about the Windsor family's collection. Discreet inquiries were being made at auction houses and among private dealers about items that matched the descriptions of some of the pieces in the hidden chambers. "I'm afraid word is beginning to leak out," Professor Hartwell said during their urgent meeting at a quiet cafe near the British Museum. "Nothing specific has been mentioned, but there are rumors circulating that a significant royal collection may be coming to market soon." This development added a new layer of urgency to their situation. If news of the collection became public before they had reached an agreement with the royal family, it could destroy any chance of a diplomatic solution. Worse, it might expose both Camilla and the royal family to exactly the kind of scandal they were trying to avoid. Camilla's anxiety reached new heights when she realized that the source of the leaks might be someone who had access to Thornfield Manor. The property was supposed to be sealed, but perhaps one of the guards or court officials had discovered something that had raised questions. Alternatively, someone in her late husband's business circle might have heard rumors about hidden assets and was investigating whether valuable items had been concealed from creditors. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after the palace meeting, Lord Pemberton called Professor Hartwell's office with a request for an immediate meeting. The tone was formal but not hostile, and he emphasized that the matter required absolute confidentiality. They were asked to come to a different location, a private club in St. James's that was known for hosting discreet discussions among the powerful and influential. The club was everything Camilla had expected from such an establishment: leather armchairs, oil paintings of distinguished gentlemen, and an atmosphere of quiet authority that came from centuries of important decisions being made within its walls. Lord Pemberton was waiting for them in a private dining room, accompanied by a woman Camilla didn't recognize but who clearly held significant authority. "Lady Camilla, Professor Hartwell," Lord Pemberton began. "Allow me to introduce Lady Margaret Thornley, who serves as special advisor to Her Majesty on matters of cultural heritage and historical preservation." Lady Thornley was an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She studied Camilla carefully as they shook hands, and Camilla had the distinct impression that every detail of her background and character had already been thoroughly investigated. "Lady Camilla," Lady Thornley said once they were seated, "I have spent the past week reviewing the documents you provided and consulting with various experts about their authenticity and historical significance. I must say, the collection your family has preserved is even more remarkable than your initial presentation suggested." She went on to explain that teams of specialists had been discreetly consulted about various aspects of the collection, from art historians who could verify the attribution of paintings to gemologists who could authenticate the jewelry pieces. In every case, the initial assessment suggested that the items were not only genuine, but represented some of the finest examples of their kind. However, Lady Thornley continued, the situation has become more complex than any of us initially anticipated. We have learned that several parties are now aware that valuable items may be hidden at Thornfield Manor, and there is growing pressure from various quarters to conduct a complete search of the property. Lord Pemberton leaned forward and explained that questions had been raised in Parliament about whether all assets had been properly accounted for in the estate's bankruptcy proceedings. There were also informal inquiries from international collectors who had somehow learned that important pieces might be available for purchase. The royal family finds itself in an impossible position, Lady Thornley said frankly. We cannot publicly acknowledge the existence of the collection without raising questions about why these items were never properly documented, but we also cannot allow pieces of such historical significance to be dispersed to private collectors or, worse, to disappear entirely. Camilla felt her heart sinking as she realized that her attempt to save her family's legacy might have inadvertently created an even bigger crisis. But Lady Thornley was not finished. Fortunately, she continued, Her Majesty has authorized me to propose a solution that we believe addresses the concerns of all parties involved. The royal family is prepared to exercise its prerogative to designate Thornfield Manor and its contents as items of outstanding historical importance, which would immediately halt any sale or transfer of the property. The proposal was more complex and generous than anything Camilla had dared to hope for. Under the arrangement, the Crown would purchase Thornfield Manor from the creditors at fair market value, effectively settling all outstanding debts. The property would then be established as a private royal residence and research facility, with Camilla appointed as its official curator and historian. The hidden collection would be properly catalogued and documented, with the most significant pieces eventually displayed in a specially built wing that would be open to scholars and researchers. Camilla and her family would be given permanent residence in the estate, along with a generous salary and budget for maintaining the collection. There are conditions, Lady Thornley warned. The arrangement would require your family to sign new agreements that formalize the relationship while maintaining absolute confidentiality about certain aspects of the collection. You would also need to work with our teams to ensure that every item is properly secured and documented according to modern museum standards. Most importantly, the official story would be that the royal family had recently discovered the existence of this historical collection and had moved quickly to preserve it for the nation. The true history of the secret arrangement would remain classified, protecting both the Windsor family's privacy and the royal family's reputation. Camilla sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what was being offered. Not only would her family's financial problems be solved, but they would be restored to their position as guardians of an incredible historical treasure, this time with official recognition and royal support. Professor Hartwell was the first to speak. This is an extraordinarily generous proposal, he said carefully. But I must ask about the timeline. How quickly would this arrangement need to be implemented? Lady Thornley's expression became more serious. Given the rumors that are circulating, we need to act within the next 48 hours. Teams are already being assembled to conduct the official discovery of the collection, and legal documents are being prepared to transfer ownership of the property. The meeting concluded with Lady Thornley handing Camilla a thick folder containing preliminary agreements and detailed plans for the transition. She was given until the following evening to review everything and provide her final answer. As they left the club and walked through the busy London streets, Camilla felt overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortunes. In just 1 week, she had gone from losing everything to being offered more than she had ever dreamed possible. But she also understood that accepting this proposal would bind her family to the royal family in ways that would echo through future generations. That evening, Camilla sat at the small table in her London flat, surrounded by legal documents that would reshape her entire future. Mrs. Henderson had prepared tea and quietly retreated to her room, understanding that this was a decision that only Camilla could make. The weight of responsibility felt enormous, not just for her own life, but for the legacy of generations of Windsor family members who had sacrificed so much to protect the royal treasures. The proposed agreements were more detailed and comprehensive than anything she had expected. Beyond the financial arrangements and living accommodations, there were specific protocols for handling visitors, guidelines for research access, and detailed security measures that would transform Thornfield Manor into something resembling a private museum. Her role would be part curator, part historian, and part guardian, exactly what her family had been doing in secret for over a century, but now with official recognition and support. As she read through the documents, Camilla began to understand the true scope of what the royal family was proposing. This wasn't just about preserving her family's collection, it was about establishing a new model for protecting British cultural heritage. Thornfield Manor would become a pilot program for maintaining historically significant collections in their original settings while ensuring proper scholarly access and preservation standards. The financial terms were generous, beyond her wildest expectations. The Crown would pay off all existing debts, provide a substantial endowment for ongoing operations, and establish trust funds that would ensure the estate's preservation for future generations. Camilla would receive a salary equivalent to that of a senior museum director, along with additional allowances for maintaining her family's traditional role as hosts to visiting dignitaries and researchers. But perhaps most importantly, the agreement included provisions for training future family members to carry on the tradition. Any children or grandchildren who showed interest and aptitude would be given specialized education in art history, conservation, and museum management, ensuring that the Windsor family's expertise would continue to serve the royal collection for generations to come. The next morning, Camilla called Professor Hartwell to discuss her concerns about specific clauses in the agreement. Her main worry was about the level of control the royal family would maintain over the collection, and whether her family would truly be partners in its preservation or merely employees carrying out royal directives. Professor Hartwell had spent the night reviewing his own copies of the documents, and he shared her concerns while also pointing out the unprecedented nature of the arrangement. In all my years of working with royal collections, he said, I have never seen the Crown offer this level of autonomy to a private family. They are essentially acknowledging your family's expertise and trusting you to continue making decisions about items that are priceless and irreplaceable. He also pointed out that the agreement included provisions for Camilla to hire her own staff and establish her own research priorities, subject only to broad oversight from the royal household. This was far more independence than most museum directors enjoyed, and it reflected the royal family's genuine respect for the Windsor family's historical role. That afternoon, Camilla made the decision to return to Thornfield Manor one final time before signing the agreements. She needed to see the hidden chambers again and make peace with the transformation that was about to occur. Lady Thornley had provided her with special permission to enter the sealed property, accompanied by discreet security personnel who had been briefed on the sensitive nature of her visit. Driving through the gates of Thornfield Manor felt like traveling back in time. The house looked exactly as it had when she left, but the presence of royal protection, officers, and the knowledge that everything was about to change gave the familiar surroundings an air of anticipation and ceremony. As Camilla descended into the hidden chambers for what might be the last time they remained secret, she was struck by the incredible responsibility that her family had carried for so many generations. These weren't just valuable objects. They were tangible connections to some of the most important moments in British history. The letters written in Queen Victoria's own hand contained thoughts and feelings that provided unique insights into the mind of one of Britain's greatest monarchs. The jewelry pieces had been worn during coronations, state dinners, and private family celebrations that had shaped the course of the empire. Standing in the underground chamber, surrounded by centuries of carefully preserved royal heritage, Camilla finally understood why her ancestors had been willing to sacrifice so much to protect these treasures. They weren't just maintaining a collection, they were preserving the intimate, personal side of royal history that official records could never capture. She spent several hours in the hidden rooms, taking final photographs and making notes about items that held special significance for her family. A small prayer book that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth I had been a particular favorite of her grandmother's, who had often held it during difficult times for comfort and inspiration. A set of watercolor paintings created by Queen Victoria during her widowhood showed a side of the monarch that the public had never seen: vulnerable, artistic, and deeply human. As evening approached, Camilla made her way back to the main house and stood in the conservatory where she had spent so many peaceful hours among her orchids. Tomorrow, teams of royal experts would arrive to begin the official discovery of the collection, and Thornfield Manor would be transformed from a private family home into a semi-public institution dedicated to preserving British cultural heritage. The irony was not lost on her that by revealing her family's secret, she had ensured its continuation in a more secure and sustainable form than ever before. The hidden treasures would remain hidden from the general public, but they would be properly cared for and made available to scholars who could help unlock their historical significance. That evening, back in her London flat, Camilla signed the final agreements, with a fountain pen that had belonged to her great-great-grandmother, the same woman whose portrait had concealed the entrance to the secret chambers. Mrs. Henderson witnessed her signature with tears in her eyes, understanding that they would soon be returning to the only home either of them had ever truly known. The transformation would begin immediately. Within a week, Camilla would be back at Thornfield Manor, but this time as its official curator rather than its dispossessed owner. The hidden chambers would be revealed to a carefully selected team of conservators and historians who would work under conditions of absolute secrecy to catalog and preserve each item. As she prepared for bed that night, Camilla felt a deep sense of satisfaction and relief. Her family's century-long guardianship of the royal treasures would continue, but now with the support and recognition they had always deserved. The Queen's lost treasures would finally receive the care and study they warranted, while remaining safely hidden from those who might exploit them for personal gain. The secret was safe, the treasures were protected, and the Windsor family's legacy would continue for generations to come. 6 months later, Camilla stood in the newly renovated library of Thornfield Manor, watching as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a young art historian from Cambridge, carefully examined a previously unknown sketch by Leonardo da Vinci that had been discovered among Queen Victoria's private papers. The transformation of her family home had exceeded even her most optimistic expectations, creating a world-class research facility while preserving the intimate character that had made it special for centuries. The official story, as reported in carefully controlled press releases, was that the royal family had recently discovered a significant collection of historical artifacts in a property they had acquired for preservation purposes. The media coverage had been respectful and focused on the scholarly importance of the find rather than its monetary value. Most importantly, the Windsor family's century-long role as secret guardians had remained completely confidential. The hidden chambers had been transformed into state-of-the-art conservation labs and storage facilities, with climate control systems and security measures that rivaled those of the world's finest museums. The narrow stone staircase had been widened and properly lit, while maintaining its historical character. What had once been Camilla's private study now served as the entrance to what was officially known as the Royal Heritage Research Center. Camilla's daily routine had evolved into something she had never imagined, but found deeply fulfilling. Her mornings were typically spent reviewing requests from scholars around the world who wanted access to specific items in the collection. The approval process was rigorous, requiring detailed research proposals and recommendations from established institutions, but it ensured that every visit contributed to genuine historical understanding. Professor Hartwell had become a regular presence at Thornfield Manor, serving as chairman of the Scholarly Advisory Committee that helped establish research priorities and publication guidelines. His expertise and connections had proven invaluable in attracting serious researchers while maintaining the confidentiality that surrounded the most sensitive items in the collection. The most remarkable discovery had occurred just 3 months after the official cataloging began. While examining a chest that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth I's, conservators had found a hidden compartment containing personal letters between the Queen and several of her closest advisors. These documents provided unprecedented insights into the decision-making process during some of the most crucial moments of her reign, including the preparation for the Spanish Armada. But perhaps the most emotionally significant moment for Camilla had come when Queen Elizabeth II herself made a private visit to Thornfield Manor to see the collection that her family had entrusted to the Windsor family's care. The Queen, now in her late 90s, had spent nearly 3 hours examining items that had been hidden from public view for decades, sharing personal memories of her mother's stories about the wartime, evacuations, and her grandmother's concerns about preserving royal heritage during uncertain times. "Your family has been the most faithful of servants," the Queen had told Camilla during a private tea in the conservatory, "and you have honored that trust beyond anything we could have hoped for. These treasures are in better condition today than when they first came into your care, and that is a remarkable achievement." The Queen's visit had been accompanied by several members of the royal family, including Prince William and his children, who were fascinated by items that had belonged to their ancestors. Watching young Prince George examine a toy soldier set that had once belonged to a young Queen Victoria, Camilla felt a profound connection to the continuity of British history that these objects represented. Mrs. Henderson had adapted to the new circumstances with remarkable grace, taking on the role of head of domestic services and training a small staff of specially vetted personnel. Her knowledge of the house's hidden passages and secret storage areas had proven invaluable during the installation of modern security systems, and her discretion and loyalty had earned her the complete trust of the royal household. The financial transformation had been equally dramatic. The estate was now fully endowed with funds that ensured its operation in perpetuity, and Camilla had been able to establish scholarship programs that brought promising young researchers to study at Thornfield Manor. The gardens had been restored to their former glory, and the main house had been updated with modern amenities while preserving its historical character. Most importantly, the legal arrangements had established clear guidelines for the collection's future. Camilla's children, when she eventually had them, would be trained from an early age to understand their family's unique responsibility. The agreement included provisions for them to receive world-class education in relevant fields, ensuring that future generations of the Windsor family would be even better prepared to serve as guardians of Britain's hidden heritage. The success of the Thornfield Manor project had also influenced royal policy toward other private collections throughout Britain. Several noble families had quietly approached the royal household about similar arrangements, leading to the establishment of a broader program for preserving culturally significant collections in their original settings while ensuring proper care and scholarly access. As Camilla walked through the evening garden, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from the brink of losing everything to this position of honored responsibility. The royal guards who had come to seize her property had ultimately been the catalyst for a transformation that honored her family's legacy while ensuring the preservation of irreplaceable historical treasures. The hidden chambers beneath Thornfield Manor were no longer secret, but they remained carefully protected from those who might exploit their contents for personal gain. The Queen's lost treasures had been found, catalogued, and preserved for future generations, but they remained safely hidden from the public eye while contributing to scholarly understanding of British royal history. That evening, as Camilla sat in her study reviewing research proposals from historians around the world, she opened the leather-bound family journal that had started this remarkable journey. On the final page, she wrote her own entry, documenting the transformation of her family's secret guardianship into an officially recognized partnership with the Crown. "Today marks not the end of our family's service," she wrote, "but the beginning of a new chapter in which our dedication to preserving royal heritage has been acknowledged and supported at the highest levels. The treasures entrusted to our care remain safe, and our commitment to their protection will continue for generations to come." Outside her window, the ancient oak trees of Thornfield Manor stood sentinel over secrets that were no longer hidden, but remained carefully protected. The Queen's lost treasures had been found, but they had also found their perfect guardians, a family whose century-long dedication had finally received the recognition and support it deserved. The story that had begun with royal guards taking Camilla's property had ended with the royal family ensuring that the most precious aspects of that property would remain in her family's care forever.